Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, tonight as we have a little bit of fun and thought we would go through and do a mock draft exercise. And we've been talking with a ton of guys who are premium members and are in the Slack channel here. We've actually got Fernando joining us as well. A lot of you guys have been reading his stuff. And we're going to have a good time tonight going through what I think is going to be a fun exercise to look at the difference in draft boards and what that can make available. I think that a lot of times fans get the idea that there's this general consensus across the league and this player is, this kind of rating or is going to be available in this spot all the time. And I think what it's going to do is be able to give the idea that, yes, many people might have that player rated highly, but not every board is going to be that way. And when you talk about 32 different draft boards and the madness of now people basically doing fantasy football drafts, all the GMs are literally going to be in their own basements and in their own houses doing this. It's going to really be an interesting exercise for the first time in the NFL. And there's a lot of anxiety from everything we've read about teams being nervous about the amount of information they have and the way that they're going to approach this draft. So what we're going to do tonight is we're going to go through 3 different mock draft simulators. We're going to go through one on the Draft Network, on Pro Football Network, and on FanSpeak. We're going to use different draft boards, and I've got a group of really well-informed guys in here who would pay a ton of attention to the draft, know what's going on here, and they're going to be my sounding board, and they're going to be my front office to be able to talk through who the players are. Hopefully, we're going to go different directions in each of the 3 simulations, and we're going to be able to take a look at how that can turn out, and if we go defensive end first, or cornerback first, or running back first, or whatever the value might be, what does that do when we see talented players at that same position fall later on, or when we go to look to pivot in other directions? Did a talent tier drop off? So we're not going to do trades tonight. We're going to stick with the picks that are there, but we'll go through that and have a little bit of fun here. So got a bunch of guys that are going to be able to join us and have some fun, and I'm going to dive right in, open up the mock draft simulator, and we will get started. Any of the guys who are going to be joining in, feel free to take yourselves off and mute, and we'll kind of get the ball rolling here. What we're going to do is start off with the Draft Network, which for most people is the most common one that you see people do screenshots of on Twitter or being shared on websites. And we have in the premium Slack channel, we have our own room for mock drafts where people can upload those and they get into the general Bills chat room as well. But it's one that's very common, and you'll see a lot of things come up. I usually put it under their player rankings. We're going to do all 7 rounds. We have it moving pretty fast here. And we're going to dive right in. So again, as we see, you'll see some of the names go by, and we'll do this each time. The Draft Network doesn't give the option to do different draft boards. With those, you'll see that on FanSpeak. Actually, like the way Steve set that up. I got to meet Steve, the owner of FanSpeak and the creator of it, while we were in Mobile for the Senior Bowl, and he actually brings in other draft boards to be able to do it. So, all right, as we're going here, we see some of the running backs are left here. All right, the board has come up here. So we'll get started. I'll rattle off some of the obvious names. We do see Jeremy Chin. We see one of the top running backs, Jonathan Taylor. A lot of people like Clyde Edwards-Helaire. From a receiver standpoint, we've got T. Higgins, Donovan Peoples-Jones. From an edge standpoint, we've got Curtis Weaver, Terrell Lewis. What are you guys thinking, and what positions do you want me to take a look at?
Corner.
Who do we got out there?
Jalen Johnson.
Jalen Johnson's a nice value. Got a vote for Taylor, one for Jeremy Chin. And that's
I'll play devil's advocate and say, why not T. Higgins?
Sure. And I think I brought that up in a conversation that happened earlier on Twitter about, I don't think that wide receiver at 54 is the most likely, but if everybody has a pretty consensus top 3 at receiver, if the guy that Bean has as wide receiver 4 or 5, which you can rattle off 6 or 7 names to me that I could believe that they have as wide receiver 4 or 5. It could be Justin Jefferson. It could be Brandon Ayuk. It could be Denzel Mims. It could be T. Higgins. If the guy that they value as wide receiver 4 somehow falls to 54, I think it's in play, and I think it's an option. I think it's not the most likely path, but I think some fans are completely dismissing it as not an option. Eric, you got some thoughts?
Yeah, I just want to ask, what do you think would be a better value for us, let's say between a Jalen Johnson versus a Duggar or Chin because they play that specialized role. What do you think would be the better direction for us to go?
It's interesting. So in the short term, I think that the big nickel would get a few more snaps. I think that the outside guy, short of it being, some people really like Jalen Johnson. So let's say it was somehow CJ Henderson or Jeff Gladney or somebody really high end. I think they'd have a chance to just come in and win that starting job. For most of the outside corners that are going to be available at 54, I think it's going to be more likely that they're developing and then a replacement for Norman and an upgrade over Wallace or battling Wallace next year. Whereas I think that there's a role where we want that big nickel to play in 2020. So now long term, the better outside corner is, more stereotypically valuable in today's world of coverage. So long term, it might make more sense. But in 2020, I think a big nickel would get more snaps and would play more. It's really similar to the idea of a running back versus an offensive tackle or a wide receiver. The wide receiver we draft is going to be wide receiver 4 at best, but that doesn't mean it's not a long-term value. If we draft a tackle at 54, he's probably not going to start or play that much this year, but they might be the best long-term value. Whereas a running back might play this year, but it might not have the best long-term value. And that's going to be interesting to see how Bean balances that between the two.
Hey, Greg, I would probably go with Chin over Johnson just because there's better value in the third and maybe fourth for cornerback. And we're looking for that Buffalo nickel.
Yeah, I think that's smart. And I think that in my mind, I actually include Antoine Winfield Jr. in that group. A lot of people have it exclusively as Duggar and Chin. And obviously you have Xavier McKinney and, some of the guys earlier on that could be an option and most likely will be gone by this point. But I actually think Antoine Winfield Jr. is not as big as those guys, but can play a lot of that same role as what they can. But after those three, I think it drops off. I think some people try to include Tanner Muse in that world. And I think that he's a good special teams player, maybe a long-term developmental guy, but not going to be ready in 2020 to contribute into that spot. So yeah, I had some questions about if Diggs was there. He's not. I think from a cornerback standpoint, Jalen Johnson would be the one. Some people like Cam Dantzler, but I don't think he's in play here. I think some Ojemudia and Bryce Hall are real common third-round picks, so they're guys we could watch for if we go another direction. So for this exercise, for the ones that are there, any vetoes of going Chin to give that exercise to go through that in this model?
Well, just to see, are there any defensive ends available?
I saw a couple of people mention Curtis Weaver, Terrell Lewis. Eric Turner is a huge fan of Jonathan Greenard. I think he'd be a later on player. Same thing for Darrell Taylor. Same thing for Bradley Anai. I like Jabari Zuniga. So I think there's a lot of guys. I'm not quite as high on Curtis Weaver. As an example, last year he had 13 and a half sacks. 9 of them came against 3 games against Portland State, UNLV, and Wyoming. So I think it looks a little better than what it really is against most of the Big Five schools. He didn't do a whole lot. So not that means he's bad. I think he's a good player, but some people throw out there that, Curtis Weaver had the number 2 pass rush win rate in college football. Well, yeah, because he whipped the crap out of some really poor talent and then was okay against higher end talent. So I like Curtis Weaver, but I don't know that I'm big on him in the second round. Any other questions or votes before we make a pick here to take the next one?
Greg.
Yeah.
Is Duggar available or not?
I think Duggar was taken. Oh no, he is there. So both Chin and Duggar are there. They have him oddly lower. They have him 72. That's interesting.
I really like Duggar because he can become even a linebacker for us.
Yeah.
He can play big nickel, but if you look at him and his size and weight and flexes, he can even play linebacker for us. He can be the big nickel short term. He can replace Kaiir or Hyde long term, maybe, or even go as a linebacker, since he's a bit similar to Milano.
Yeah, I think
size-wise.
It's
Okay.
funny. I think people think of Milano as now, and they see the Instagram videos with his enormous arms. When he was coming out, he's 6'2", 223. I think that he was at the combine, and I mean, that's
Yeah.
what these guys are. Right? Heck, Jeremy Chin's bigger than that. Jeremy Chin, I keep comparing to Cam Chancellor. He's a freaking jackhammer when he's out on the field. I do like Duggar, and I think that he's a little quicker and more versatile. I'm intrigued by the intimidating force that I think Chin could be at that big nickel. I think he could really lay the hammer on some guys, but I think Duggar checks a ton of boxes. In the show I did with Matt Fairburn, I think the Bills are going to like him a lot, and he checks a lot of their boxes. I don't know a ton about Chin off the field and what kind of option he'd have there, but
Yeah, I'm actually even show you my hand, because I have just my mock draft 3.0 almost ready, and Duggar is my pick at the second round, and I really see him as similar as Edmonds at linebacker, him at the defensive back position because he's crazy athletic, and
yeah.
long. He has long arms. His combine was amazing, and I think he can have really a similar impact as Edmonds, but on the defensive back group. So he's really intriguing in my opinion because all the versatility and his athleticism.
So I think this discussion is going to be really similar to what Bean is going to be managing in the draft room. And honestly, it's probably going to be pretty similar to our setup right now, where it's going to be on Zoom. It's going to be multiple people kind of chiming in like this. And at that second round pick, the 54th pick, there's going to be multiple people available. And there's going to be people that they're going to be juggling. Okay, so who's the likelihood? One position we haven't talked about here is Josh Jones. And on the overall draft board, there's actually a chance he's the highest rated player that's out there. Is many people have him as the 5th offensive tackle in the draft. And I'm not huge on him, but I don't see him available at this spot all that often. So they have him a little bit lower. I'm going to switch it to the predictive board. Isaiah Wilson, I've heard a lot of people compare with the Bills just because of the big mauling size and similarity to Ford. So I think there's a couple different spots that are interesting there. Let's make a pick here and then see who gets available. Let's go with the big nickel, and
Let's go with Duggar.
Yeah, Duggar or Chin. Any big thoughts there? We'll do the big nickel in this one.
I say Duggar because of the versatility, and that's what they preach. That's what they, look for the most. I think that's honestly the best option to go at this point.
Yeah, I'm happy with either. It really seems to be split. Everywhere I look, it's they kind of got both of them on the same level as each other. I mean, a little different skill sets they offer, but roughly the same value.
I personally like Chin, but let's go with Duggar just because I agree. I think there's some versatility there. I want to see what it nets out as we get to the later picks here. And again, we're passing up Jonathan Taylor, we're passing up Josh Jones, we're passing up T. Higgins, some really strong talent at some other positions. Let's take Duggar and then see what comes back at the next pick. And that's going to be the kind of discussion there. And as you look, the very next picks were T. Higgins, Jonathan Taylor, right off the bat, right afterwards. So it's going to be interesting how that kind of works out as they get there. So now we got, the pick right before us was the last couple picks were the Prince Tega Wanago, Akeem Davis-Gaither, and Michael Pittman Jr., Jonathan Greenard, 4 guys who I'm big fans of. So now we get in here. We've got the big nickel. I do think that they will look to balance things between offense and defense. We have another one of the offensive tackles there in Michael Pert. I think that he'd be an option. At wide receiver, we had a little bit of a drop-off. You go to Donovan Peoples-Jones, Brian Edwards, who I am a big fan of, but I'd prefer to try to snag him a little bit later. We do have one of the top 5 running backs left in Cam Akers. We went big nickel, so I don't know that they'd go big nickel and corner right back to back, but Michael Ojumudia is there. Amik Robertson, a lot of people have as the top nickel corner. And then just overall talent, Antonio Gibson, kind of that, hybrid running back wide receiver guy. And then from an edge standpoint, it looks like Darrell Taylor, Khalid Kareem, Jabari Zuniga, Bradley and I. What names are jumping out at you guys here? Got a lot of votes for Akers in the chat.
Yeah,
Akers.
Cam.
All right.
Cam.
Hey, And any strong feelings against going here? I agree. I've said the whole time I like if we go in the second round, it would be Jonathan Taylor, J.K. Dobbins, DeAndre Swift. If we wait till the third round, if one of Clyde Edwards-Helaire or Cam Akers make it there, that's actually my sweet spot from a value standpoint. I'd love to see. So I certainly am on board with that pick. And any strong feelings against going Cam Akers?
No, you guys will probably know a little more than me, but I would kind of think about one of those edge rushers. But if you think Cam Akers is a better value, then go for it.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I think Darrell Taylor would absolutely be a name they would look at. I don't know that I think if it was me, I would take Akers and then hope that Zuniga, Anai, Willekes, Highsmith, one of those guys make it back to us. But I do think that Taylor would be an intriguing option for them. I think that the Cam Akers would be a strong enough value to take them.
Yeah, I just wouldn't go running back that early, you know. I think I'm a really big fan of Modern, and I think he needs to play a lot. And I think we can find value later in the draft with other running backs like Elam, for example. Okay, so that's my thing against going Akers in round 2. But he has some value. Obviously, he's a good pick. I just think we could go at rusher there, or I really like Ane. Okay, I like him, but
let's go for that top 10 offense.
Well, I think this is going to be a good exercise. Let's go with Akers here, and now we're rolling the dice. I'm going to filter it to edge. Let's see if one of those top guys make it back to us, because all of a sudden, if we see all 4 of those guys who are there go, we could regret that, because I do think that there's some potential to get running back value later on if we can get one of these guys to make it back to us.
I'm getting closer.
All right, of course. And this is reality. So in those final picks, we saw Khalid Kareem, Jabari Zuniga, Bradley Anai, and Kenny Willekes all go. So this is the reality, and exactly what Fernando was saying is that's what Brandon Beane's going to be facing, is that if you want to be able to do that and you see that tier drop off coming, and I'll use this example, I could see that being a spot where, you know, all of a sudden right around here, if you see that the exact tier we were watching, we made it up to 115 with none of those guys going. And then all of a sudden, okay, one of the 4 goes. 2 picks later, the second one goes. Right there around 119, 120, historically has been when Brandon Beane has moved up. You're talking from 128 up to 119. It probably cost us a 5th round pick, maybe a 6th round pick to move up just a couple spots in the 4th round. When you see that tier dropping off, that's been when Brandon Beane's made his move. So I think it's very likely that that's a spot he would jump up and snag Bradley and I in that role. But in the exercise we're going through here, you see that risk. If you roll the dice, even if Cam Akers sounds fun and exciting, you can have a drop off at another position to be able to do that. So let's look at who is left. At edge, you have Nick Coe. I think Alton Robinson's interesting.
Here is where I start thinking that an edge pick here isn't going to play much. Yeah. And with the new signings that we have, we could wait till next year.
Yeah. Well, and that matches what Fernando said as well in looking at that might be a reason to go edge earlier, where let's flip back to running back. If I hadn't have gone Akers there, A.J. Dillon's still here. Darrington Evans is still here. LaMichael Pirine still here. Some interesting names. So that sometimes it feels sexy to get the running back earlier, but the trade-off of if we had taken Darrell Taylor there and now still had Darrington Evans, let's say, at running back, or even waited another round, sometimes that combination can net out. So we'll look at that in some of the other simulations here.
There's my pick right there.
Who do you like, Eric?
Right at the top.
KJ Hill?
Yep.
No, he's nifty, man. He looked good at the Senior Bowl. I have it in my mind that they're going to want that bigger size presence because that's the skill set that's not quite there yet. But maybe it's just showing that they care about separation and route running and good footwork, and that's what the top 3 receivers are, and they just want more of that, where both KJ Hill and Courtney Davis would be options there. Lynn Bowden would be an option, as kind of an upgrade to Isaiah McKenzie. offensive line, we did drop off a fair amount there. Some people, there's some projects like Terrence Steele, Justin Herron, Alex Taylor, but nothing too exciting. Okay, here's one that's interesting. Both Ben Bredesen and John Simpson are really strong values who I think could come in, mentor for a year under John Feliciano. Feliciano's contract is up next year, and they could easily step in 2021 to start for him. So those would be my options right there between Bredesen and John Simpson.
I'm with you with John Simpson. That would be my pick.
He's a monster.
Me too. Me too.
He
Especially
is
after Eric's
BP dude.
movie study on him, right?
Oh yeah.
It was really good.
Hey, he's one of those guys who's like 6'5", 338, something like that, which is a guard is huge. He's a big, powerful man. Mike chiming in on that. Yeah, he goes in and gets people, pushes them all around. Any thoughts against going John Simpson here? I think that's a great pick, 128.
No, you can never have enough good offensive linemen.
Yep, develop.
Yeah, that develops a great term for it too. I think that it really sets them up well where we don't need him to play year one. You have Spencer Long already. You have, Feliciano, you have Quentin Spain. And then all of a sudden both Feliciano and Long's contract is up next year. And now all of a sudden you've already drafted the guy. You don't need a rookie to step in. You have a second year guy who's, ready to move into that world and ready to do that.
Yeah, my philosophy is you draft linemen for development and skill players to play now.
Yeah, it's not far off. I think that there's some nuance in some of the spots, but certainly a lot of those you can step in and play much earlier than both offensive and defensive line. I think that there's more nuance to that than people think.
Especially thinking about our O-line, who are the long-term guys, right? Dawkins maybe, but his contract is up in a year or so, right? And Ford
obviously you hope the Ford takes a step forward this next year.
Yeah, but we aren't sure about him as a tackle or a guard, right? So
yeah,
offensive line is always interesting, especially thinking long term. We have a lot of veteran band-aids. Let's put it this way, right?
Yeah, and you look at, I think a lot of people think Mitch Morris is only 28, so I think that Morris is probably a long-term piece. I think he signed for the 28, 29, 30, so through 31. So I think that, short of something odd happening, and obviously we hope we don't see any more of the concussion issues and things that he had, I think that he's a long-term piece. But yeah, I mean, it's hard to argue that we have a lot of solidified long-term options, and plenty of people are concerned about, we like Deion Dawkins, but are we ready to pay him $75 million? So I've argued that it's just the necessary evil of doing business. But yeah, there's a lot of freaking money for a guy who's pretty good. He's not elite. He's pretty good. And that's just the challenge of what comes in there. So in the chat here, we've got some questions. We haven't taken wide receiver yet, and there are some interesting talents here. I think that this is the end of that last tier of talent. Tyler Johnson, Devin Duvernay, Isaiah Hodgins, Quintez Cephas, and Antonio Gandy-Golden. I like all 5 of those guys. And I think getting to this point, that's a pretty nice value in the 5th round. So that's an intriguing one. On the cornerback side, I saw Lamar Jackson and Dane Jackson's names come up a lot, and they're not really good athletes. They're not. I think there's some possibility we could work with them, but the talent drops off pretty strongly at corner. I certainly would feel better about the wide receivers that are there.
Clark would be the only one that I'd consider here.
Sure. Yeah. Neville, there's a little possibility there. Jonathan Garvin.
Garvin's not bad.
That's interesting. So I think that he'd be oh, that's funny. So Derek Tuska was not in the Draft Network system yesterday. They added him today. So it's an interesting update. All right. I would be leaning pretty heavily towards receiver. And any thoughts on one of these guys and Antonio Gandy-Golden being the 5th? Any thoughts on those 5
Tyler
receivers?
Johnson looks like a good value there.
Yeah.
Is this the Johnson that has off the field problems or not?
Yeah. So let me talk about that for a second. It's come up a couple times. So I think from everything that I've read, there does seem like there's a maturity issue. So Tyler Johnson had some monster production at Minnesota. I don't know if they show a lot of the production here. He, the dominator rating and breakout age, and some of the analytics crowd really likes him. He had some weird decision making after the year. He signed up for the Shrine game and then he backed out with no injury, just made himself unavailable. He signed up for the Senior Bowl and then he backed out. No injury, nothing there. He showed up ready to run and do all drills at the combine and then said he would not be participating. He had interviews with some teams and then backed out and didn't do interviews with some teams. So either he has the worst agent in football history, or that agent has literally like an old school NBA promise that someone has committed we're going to draft him in X round, which I don't think happens in the NFL. Or he's just getting some bad advice from, an uncle or whatever happens in some of these guys' lives that they're telling him what he should or shouldn't do. And he's made some weird impressions on people. I don't think so it's not like he's got domestic violence issues or drug issues or something really serious, but it seems like there's a weird maturity issue and some weird decision making. So that's come up a lot about the cloud around Tyler Johnson and whether there's off-field issues. So when people talk about some questions, there are some questions about maturity. And, I think there's some questions about, is that fair to look into? Does he love football? Does he want to do this as a profession? Or is he more concerned about the money side of it? Is he more concerned about, appearances and things like that? And I don't know. I don't know enough about it. I do know that it's weird that he signed up for and backed out of 3 different things with no injury and no other news coming out, and it looked weird. So that's come up from a lot of people, Dom, and I don't know. If you just look on paper, you're talking about a 6'2", 205-pound guy with awesome production, and in most years would be like a second-round pick. He would look like if he checked all the boxes off the field. Looks athletic and a stud on the field. So if he's one of those guys that if they feel like they can harness that and bring him in and get the right things going, that would make a lot more sense. But it's interesting where
not that
has come
big
from.
of a risk for the 5th round, though.
Yeah, correct. Anything here, these are flyers. These are guys that, if they don't pan out, it was a 5th round pick. There's no skin off our back.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm a fan of Isaiah Hodgins.
Hodgins is a little more of the jump ball, bigger guy.
Yeah.
He's 2 inches taller and definitely a good jump ball guy. I like him late. What were you saying, Fernando?
Oh, I was just saying that we need to think about the information that are available for us and the information that the Bills brass can get from him, right?
Oh,
so
100%.
Maybe in an interview, they can feel all right about Tyler Johnson, and from the production standpoint, he's a great guy.
There are enough.
Right?
Adam?
I think the only problem with that might be that they wouldn't get that face-to-face with Johnson. So
that's a great point, Eric. And this year's going to be a good
Yeah,
test.
that's a good.
So let's say if he was the last guy in that tier, if those other few guys weren't there, and they're saying, all right, he's got a good talent, but we hadn't been able to see him face-to-face, we'll go ahead and take that risk that our locker room is going to handle that. But seeing as that there's some other guys there with, roughly in the same tier, they'll say maybe go with the safer pick in that area.
Yeah, I agree. And I think they're able to do a fair amount in Zoom and in talking and doing some of the video calls and things like that. But it's going to be interesting how that nets out with some of these, and if they're able to get that. A name that nobody's brought up yet, I actually really liked Antonio Gandy-Golden at the Senior Bowl. He's a guy who played a lower level of competition at Liberty and really dominated. His film is ridiculous because he's just a man amongst boys, 6'4", 220, and ran really well. He's a really, really good athlete that I think would be interesting to give some time to develop behind some of the guys that we have. So I think that he's a guy that would be in play here as well.
You know what, Greg? He reminds me of the undrafted white guy we grabbed last year.
Riley?
No, last year, not.
Hill.
What's his name? The one that
Hills,
was.
huh? Hills.
Oh, David Sills. Yeah,
Yeah.
Taylor got it in the chat. David Sills. No,
Yeah.
that's not a bad comp, but that might not be far off. And it all depends on if it translates onto the field.
I mean, I would rather go with Johnson.
Yeah.
If it
Yeah,
was
me
me.
too. Me too. I think it's worth it at this moment, and at some point the Bills are going to trust their locker room, right?
Yeah.
And
They just
their
did it with
veterans.
Diggs.
Yeah.
They just showed it with Diggs that they obviously feel like a guy who's competitive, and that's going to be the question with Tyler Johnson is if they figure out that, hey, he's got a voice in his outside life that's maybe not pointing him the right direction, but he loves football, he's dedicated to it, he was in working out all the time, he was always the first one in the film room. If they get stuff like that and they think they can get him away from the outside influences that are guiding him the wrong way, I think that could really be a hidden value there. So let's go with that. And I think this is the kind of discussion they'll be having that I think you brought it up, Fernando, that they're going to have a lot more access to information than we do.
Sure.
We're hearing weird rumors and stuff on
And that's a wide receiver. There is no guarantee about the guy making the team, right? Because
oh yeah,
there is McKenzie, there is Foster, there is Duke who finish strong, right? So the guy needs to come in and compete and do all things all right, or he can be gone. Right?
So let's step back and look real quick. We have Kyle Duggar, kind of safety, big nickel area. Cam Akers at running back. John Simpson at guard. Tyler Johnson at wide receiver. So no edge, no true corner, no linebacker. What do we have out here?
I'd grab Bayless or Warren.
Jonathan Garvin's out there still.
Garvin's still there, yeah.
Garvin would be my vote right now from an edge standpoint. Getting him in the 6th would be a huge value.
I like Garvin as well.
Jared Pinkney's a little interesting at a late tight end. Neville Clark is still there from a corner standpoint. That's interesting. I would feel pretty strongly here. Garvin's a pretty good value for this late. Any concerns with going with him?
Nope.
I'm good too.
I like it. All right. So I really think we're checking a lot of boxes right now. So as this is scrolling through again, big nickel, running back, a really powerful guard, an upside wide receiver, a pretty strong value at edge later on. This is where I always type in and look at, hey, look, Braden Mann's available. We can take a punter. I'm gonna give Joe Marino a hard time. They still haven't added Michael Turk, which makes me angry. The options that are there, we haven't taken a linebacker. So when you get into this area, sometimes some of the athletic upside guys can be interesting. So very recently, Mo Berry went, Justin Sternad went, Michael Divinity Jr. went.
Where's Muse?
It's an interesting one. He has gone. Tanner Muse is gone. So he's the guy. Jalen Elliott's not a terrible option here. On paper, it looks like a second safety, but we're kind of counting Kyle Duggar as a big nickel.
I am a big fan of wide receiver Bayless.
Yeah, what have you liked about anybody who's listening? He's from Arkansas State.
I just like his size.
Yeah.
I just like what Joe really has to say about him. You need that wide receiver 4 guy.
No, I think he's got some upside. I think that in this scenario, he'd have a tough time beating out Tyler Johnson, but he'd be a good hedge.
True.
If you're taking a guy with, some off-field risk, that could be an option to kind of weigh that balance of hoping one of them pans out versus the other.
Or you go the opposite of Johnson and go Joe Reed in the next pick or something.
Yeah, he's I know Joe's a huge fan of him. The jitterbug out of Virginia. He's the guy who would, really give McKenzie a run for his money. Really fast, athletic guy. here this is the second pick in the 6th round at 207. If they go with a specialist, if they are to pick a kicker or a punter, I do think that this is the spot where they would go. Another guy, Tyler Bass, is a guy that I really like. He's got a cannon for a leg as a kicker. So he's another guy who would be interesting.
I would go punter, Greg. I would go punter there. I've been just rewatching our last game, right, against the Texans, and one thing that people don't talk enough is about Bohorquez letting us down in an important time of the game there. Okay, he chunked the punt badly later in the game and cost us.
Oh yeah, and it's
so inconsistent, right?
Yes, that's the key word is that, and Kari Vedvik that they brought in is the same thing. They both have ridiculous legs and can uncork a 70-yard punt, but the next one might be 26 yards off the side of their foot, and if that happens at the wrong time, it just crushes you. And I actually am a huge fan. I like Michael Turk again out of Arizona State, but most people pretty universally have Braden Mann as the best punter in the draft. And whoever they think, if they think there's a guy you can pick, and now with the rookie contract, we have him for 4 years, it puts us in a really good spot to be able to do that. So I actually think it's worthwhile to go that route. I do it in a lot of the mocks just for fun, but I actually think that it's more in play than what people think. And I think that a lot of people have this idea that you would always get your punter as an undrafted free agent or a street free agent. But the best punters in the league last year, Michael Dixon out in Seattle and, Mitch Wisnowski and a lot of the best kickers were drafted. You're starting to see more and more of those guys be valued. And you want it as a day 3 pick. You're not going to go Shane Lechler and pick him, like the Raiders did years ago. But, if you can get a guy that is going to be a consistent contributor, I think it has a little more value than what some people assume. Any issues with going Braden Mann here?
Nope.
All right. And now we got one more pick on the board, and we took a little bit longer here, so we'll do one more sim tonight. Instead of doing 3, we'll do one more here, but we'll go into this pick, and then we'll pivot over to another one and then take a look at their draft board. So again, we've gone with a big nickel, safety, a running back, a guard, a wide receiver, an edge, and a punter. So almost everything's on the board. I would say we didn't get a strong kind of special teams kind of guy. So
Joe Reed,
the guy there is he on the board? Yep. He is. Joe Reed is there, and he would be a guy that actually could give Andre Roberts a run for his money. He's a strong returner. From a coverage standpoint, a lot of the guys that I look at are now gone. From a corner standpoint, I don't. Stanford Samuels III is not a terrible option, but most of the guys there are gone. Any other names you guys look at from a late round standpoint? Desmond Patton's actually a name that I look at here. James Prochet is a guy that you could have mirror and mimic Cole Beasley and just watch him to be able to develop into that role. We have Nick Easley, who's kind of similar to that. Quez Watkins is a guy who I think ran the second fastest 40 in the draft, or one of the top 2 or 3 there, and he did that at 6'1". So he's really thin, but very, very fast guy.
When we're talking about 6th or 7th rounds, I just have to go with the ridiculous athletes.
Yeah. Speaking of that, another project that's out there, Alex Taylor is a guy who has an 88-inch wingspan. He's got a 7'4" wingspan. The longest arms in the draft, biggest hands in the draft. He is just a physical marvel at 6'9", 308. I got to meet him at the Senior Bowl. He is just, it's like meeting Shaq or something like that. When you see, he just stands out amongst other professional athletes. And he's the kind of guy that needs time to develop, but would be very interesting to go with here. So he'd be another option from a developmental standpoint, as a guy that I think has is worth taking a stab at to be able to put together that kind of upside or value as well.
Yeah, I really like Taylor there, especially at this position, right? Like just we talked about Dawkins, about Ford. maybe he can develop into a good option down the stretch, right?
Yeah, and again, at this late, there's no
It's a long
downside. So
shot,
it's
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's and this is a good spot to be able to question what would have the higher likelihood of making the team. Would it be someone like Joe Reed beating out, that last spot with Andre Roberts, Isaiah McKenzie, Duke Williams, Robert Foster probably fighting for one spot, assuming that Tyler Johnson makes it is the earlier pick. Or is it, Alex Taylor when you already picked John Simpson and we already have 8 under contract? This is the kind of spot that Bean's going to be in, and honestly, it's probably why we're not going to make all 7 picks that are there, because
Yeah, probably
I think
this
it's going to
pick
be
is
tough for all of
gone,
them to
right?
make a roster. We'll go
Probably
with
this pick
Taylor
is
in this
gone
one,
in
and
the trade.
yeah, see who's there in the next one. So again, we'll kind of wrap up this one and see what the final one is. I'll take a picture of it here to have in the final picks afterwards to show our recap. So the Bills end up with Kyle Duggar at 54, Cam Akers at 86, guard out of Clemson John Simpson at 128, wide receiver from Minnesota Tyler Johnson at 167, defensive end from Miami Jonathan Garvin at 188, punter from Texas A&M Braden Mann at 207, and tackle from South Carolina State Alex Taylor at 239. I thought that was a really good draft, honestly. I thought that turned out very well. We'll keep that one.
Yeah, that's a good draft. It just it doesn't thrill me, but it's good.
And that's going to be interesting to see how that comes out on draft night. Is that I hope that we get one of those ridiculous values that just falls to us and we're all celebrating and can't believe that whoever it is fell in our lap. But it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. I'm going to do one for FanSpeak here just because I know they have a lot of different options of draft boards. And for anybody who doesn't do it, again, Steve is a friend of ours at Cover One, does a nice job. He brings in a lot of different draft boards. So I'm going to pick Matt Miller's board. There was, I think, a bunch of them updated very recently here. And you could pick anything that's there. You can customize your own board. So if you want to play around, you can actually customize your own to be able to do it. I'm going to pick that one. We'll go with Matt Miller's. I always pick random. I don't want them to use the same board that I do because I think it's a good exercise to be able to go through and do it. So I always pick random. I don't really know what the difficulty level is, so we'll do difficult. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know what that actually changes, to be completely honest.
Me neither.
And then
against Bill O'Brien all the time, or
yeah, they don't have that setting on there. That would be unfair. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. And again, FanSpeak actually does offer trades to you, so I will. I'm going to let this run because it goes round by round. So we'll see as it goes. And again, that they're very similar setup. You have your draft board going here, and it kind of rattles through each of the picks. So last time we started out with a big nickel and then a running back, and ended up going with an edge later and then a guard where it was our third pick. So we didn't go cornerback early, we didn't go wide receiver early, we didn't go edge early. So I'd like to look in those areas just to see how the board falls a little bit differently. The first round is wrapping up here. We're going to go to our next round. Again, sometimes they'll actually even trigger trades to you if you're using this site. So as we're starting to look here, we see on their board, Clyde Edwards-Helaire is the top one. Cesar Ruiz is a center. I'd be kind of surprised if we went that direction, but he's a talent. Duggar and Chin are the 2 top players on the board. Duggar just went. Okay, so we got offered some handful of trades here. I don't think we would do any of these. They're offering a future second to drop down into the third. That's actually not horrible value. That's actually something I think the Bills would consider, dropping down to the third to pick up a future second. We're not going to do that here, but that's interesting. So, okay. J.K. Dobbins is there, which again, we already did a high running back here, so we'll try to avoid that. Raekwon Davis is a name I haven't really seen fall to this point, but is interesting. Laviska Shenault. Directly from a corner standpoint, you have Damon Arnett would be a fit for the Bills. Bryce Hall is there. From an edge standpoint, Josh Uche is interesting. That's a name that I could see us go after. Some people have compared him to almost the way we use Zoe. He could play some strong ball linebacker and then also some edge on third down. Julian Akwara fits a little bit more the archetype of the size and build of player that we normally look for. Laviska Shenault is a high rated talent of what's there, so that's an interesting one. Again, Raekwon Davis, Isaiah Wilson, and Lucas Niang. Some tackles fell a little bit further. Who's screaming out to you guys here?
I really like Niang and Chenault there. I really like both different positions, right? And I think Chenault can replicate what Mackenzie does, but way better, right?
Oh yeah, my comparison before was for all the things that you like Isaiah McKenzie that he does at 5'7", 173. Imagine if he was 6'2", 225. and he could still do all the same things, but is a full 4 inches taller, 5 inches taller, and 40, 50 pounds heavier and strong, ridiculously strong for a wide receiver. He's a guy that I think in the future we could see that there was a reason he was rated as a top 15 to 20 prospect. And he's one of those examples that when people stopped playing football, he was universally a top 20 pick. And since they stopped playing football, he's now all of a sudden a mid-second round pick, and nobody's played any football since then. And it's always interesting to me when those things happen. He does have some injury red flags, and that would certainly be something that we have to hope the team got enough good medical info at the combine before things got shut down here due to the virus. So it's interesting that the chat is pretty unanimous in Shenault. So I would lean that way as well. Is there anyone who feels strongly we shouldn't go Laviska Shenault?
The only thing I'd say is Dobbins is there.
Yeah.
But
we went running back early last time, but I agree.
I know.
Dobbins being on the board there would be pretty tough to pass. Let's go Shenault and see where that takes us here tonight. And again, I think he's the kind of player that, or J.K. Dobbins, either of those,
Come
and
on,
we
guys.
passed on.
Let's trust Singletary. Come on, losing the beast.
It's I think that Shenault would be in a perfect position. You talk about the way that our team is set up with the medical facilities, having top 3 receivers, that there's no pressure on him.
No pressure
You can
anymore,
use him
right?
for those gadget
trade up
jet
for
sweeps.
Dobbins.
Yeah, I can't lie. We for
Trade
sure.
Trade up.
Wait, 4 more.
Oh my God.
All right. So
Wow.
yeah, we're just going to take J.K. Dobbins because that's silly. There's no way he would be available here, but that's fun. So we're going to take him. I'm going to hurry up and do that before the computer takes him away. We just opened up with Laviska Shenault and J.K. Dobbins. That is a ridiculous addition.
It's starting to become in the draft that Dominic told us about, huh?
Yeah, well,
really good one.
And this is what we're for Dom not being excited. This one certainly does excite us. This is also the difference when you look at different draft boards and different things that are there. And I don't know that it's likely that Shenault falls to 54, and I think it's unlikely Dobbins falls to 86. But I think some people treat it as though that's not possible. No, that's not going to happen. It's just not an option for it. There's certainly, I'd love if Darrell Taylor somehow made it to us here.
I mean, Shenault was being mocked to us at 22, so if you can get him at 54, I would take the chance.
Oh yeah. That's an easy one. So, okay, we've now gone through. We got 2 offensive players. So I feel pretty confident we lean defense here. At edge, we do have Kenny Willekes. That's an interesting one, and Jonathan Garvin's there. And Akeem Davis-Gaither would be a fantastic value. I'm a big fan of that one. Troy Pride Jr. is nice this late. He's a solid corner. Michael Ojemudia is there. They have him way too low, in my opinion. At safety,
what kind of linebacker is Gaither?
So Gaither's basically the same as Chin and Duggar. He went to Appalachian State. He's a guy that is 6'2", 220 and runs sideline to sideline. He, I think, is almost more big nickel than linebacker, but could be the long term. If for some reason contract things don't work out with Matt Milano, he's more in that mold than a strong side. He's not an AJ Klein. He's not a stacked, guy who's going to be a run stuffer. He's more sideline to sideline speed, but he's a heck of an athlete and was certainly checks a lot of the process boxes from that standpoint in the interviews.
I'm sold.
Is there any good guard or tackles there?
So Ben Bredesen he's a really good value this late as well. He was a guy who was on the board when we were talking about John Simpson.
Pert's still there?
Yeah, Pert. Yeah, that would be my two choices. I'd be between Pert and Akeem Davis Gaither. Those would be my two top ones.
Eric, how about Jimudi? I really like him as a zone corner prospect, right? He really fits the schemes, right?
Oh yeah. And they have him rated low here. I'm curious to see why. I might actually reach out to Steve. Right? Yeah, and ask why he's rated as low as he is. Let's choose between Pert and Davis Gaither. What do you guys think of between those two?
I would go Davis Gaither there, to be honest.
We started with I like Pert, and I actually think in a vacuum, Pert might be a slightly higher value. Mike just brought it up. I should ask Matt Miller, not Steve, because it is Miller's board. We'll go with Davis Gaither just because we opened with offense, and now I am going to monitor this corner market here. I'd love to see Pride make it to us, Darnay Holmes, Harrison Hand, Ojemudia. Those are the four guys that I think fit some of them. Holmes, Hand, and Ojemudia are really strong from a the zone concepts and the size that we like to see, good tackling. So those are definitely ones that I'm looking for to fall here. A lot of people like Troy Broad Jr. I actually think that Hand and Ojemudia are a little better fits for our defense. We're almost there. Nice. I certainly would feel strong. I think Ojemudia would be a great pick here. Some other options. Keith Ishmael is a nice interior lineman. So is Shane Lemieux, another interior lineman who I think could be able to make the team. I wish we hadn't already having 9 or 10 defensive linemen, because I think Laro Murchison could make it, but he'd come in as like our 6th or 7th defensive tackle, and that's just an uphill climb to be able to make the roster at that spot.
What do you think of Geno Stone?
I do like him. I think that there's a possibility he'd be there. I think that, and it's funny, it's basically two guys from the same defensive backfield, Ojemudia and Stone. I think Ojemudia is a little bit better, but I actually like him. I think Stone is a guy that we would look at in this area. Funky was asking about Javaris Davis. He's a guy that out of Auburn. I didn't see him here. He's a guy that I know. There is Javaris Davis. He's a guy that obviously Christian Page is a big fan of. He was all over the ball in the Senior Bowl as we were doing ones there. I would lean towards Ojemudia. He'd be my pick here.
Me too. I think he fits great on Frazier's schemes, McDermott's schemes. He's a perfect zone corner prospect there. And I was willing to take him earlier, so this would be a crazy good pick in my opinion.
Yeah.
Getting him this late, I think, is a nice one.
Yeah.
All right. So we've opened up Laviska Shenault, J.K. Dobbins, Akeem Davis Gaither, Michael Ojemudia. This is one of the better mock drafts I've seen so far, to be completely honest.
I'm ready to go home.
Yeah, this was a good one to end on. So again, we'll start
punter, kicker now.
Yeah, seriously, we can really play around here. So all right, we are now up.
Patrick Taylor.
Patrick Taylor is not. Well, we already got Dobbins.
True. Never mind.
Jonah Jackson would be another ridiculous value this late here. I think that's crazy that they still have him on the board. I didn't even see him there later. He's a monster interior line wise. We don't have a lineman yet, so he'd be a strong initial pick. Evan Weaver at linebacker is another option. So is Willie Gay Jr. I think those are both guys who could contribute on special teams as rookies and then develop later on, but both have the athleticism to contribute there. Again, we already got Davis Gaither, so definitely have some options there. Kayvon Wallace might be an option at safety. We do have all of the kickers and punters here, so I think we could probably wait until the second 6th rounder for one of those guys. They like Braden Mann so much they have him listed twice, so that's a nice option. My vote would be Jonah Jackson. He is a big mauler as a guard standpoint, would be a great value here in the 6th round.
Hard to go wrong.
All right, let's go with him. And then I would look at make sure one of our punters make it to us here, that we're able to get one of those top guys. And again, I like Michael Turk. He's got a pedigree from a family standpoint. Both his dad and his uncle were in the NFL. Matt Turk was a longtime punter for like 20 years in the NFL, was his uncle. So he has a lot of pedigree from that standpoint. And most people have Braden Mann rated a little bit higher than him, but I think that he's another nice option. But sometimes I pick Turk just because they have him in the database here and they don't have him on the other site. Any other spots you guys want to look at? Again, Harrison Hand still being there is pretty interesting.
Yeah, he's another good zone.
I'd almost want a double dip.
Yeah, it'd be tough for them to make the roster, but he's certainly an awesome value this late. So that's hard to turn down. Carter Coughlin is a guy that I like as a late pick from just an athletic standpoint. They kind of played him as a rush linebacker. He'd be a tweener a little bit for us. He's not your stereotypical option there.
Trevor Hill is a smaller guy, but he's a really solid pass rusher, right?
Oh yeah, no, this late in the 6th round, he would certainly be worthwhile. Let's see, Nick Coe. Let's go with the punter here just to lock it in, and then see who's available here for those next spots, and we'll take the best value that's available, even if we double up on somebody. But yeah, this one's turning out really nice. So the final couple choices.
If Raquan Williams is there, but I'm not sure how he makes the team.
The same thing. I like, he's a great value. I'd have a hard time not picking him, but it's going to be tough to make this roster from a defensive tackle standpoint. I think defensive tackle is the leading option to be the Wyatt Teller, Russell Bodine trade of this year. Is that somebody's, we're going to end up trading one of those guys just because we have so many options available. So both Tuska and Coughlin are there. I think those are both guys who could contribute from a special team standpoint. Javelin Guidry, I think, was one of the top 2 or 3 40 times in the combine. Alohi Gilman is a interesting player. So we have so far Laviska Shenault, J.K. Dobbins, Akeem Davis Gaither, Michael Ojumudie, Jonah Jackson, Michael Turk. So we have wide receiver, running back, guard, linebacker, cornerback. Let's go with an edge. So let's pick between Tuska and Coughlin. James Smith-Williams isn't a crazy choice there. Anybody reach out to you guys from an edge standpoint?
I wouldn't know the difference with these guys.
No.
Carter Coughlin is a guy who is a really high-end athlete, did really well at the combine, has some production from Minnesota. He's not big enough, I think, to play every down defensive end, but I think that he can have a role on this team, and I think would have a chance to make it, to be able to make special teams and contribute in a situational pass rush standpoint, and could develop, and build up a little bit of a bigger frame as he goes forward. But man, I think we hit this one out of the park. This one really, really went well. And to end up with Laviska Shenault, J.K. Dobbins, Akeem Davis Gaither, Michael Ojumudie, Jonah Jackson, Michael Turk, Carter Coughlin, that is just ridiculous. That is a fantastic output here. So that one, I think that you guys did a fantastic job with this one. And we'll wrap it up there for tonight. I really appreciate you guys taking the time to jump on. we'll be able to go through this and do another one of these exercises later on this week or potentially next week. I think that we'll kind of keep going through this as we get ready for the draft. I'll have a couple other guests on that will do some of these kind of mock draft exercises, want to be able to take the time to go through. But I think tonight was a good example that there are different draft boards out there. There are different ways teams are going to look at it. I joked before, I'm really excited about thinking of the idea of Dave Gettleman having to use a laptop and being able to figure out how to work here. And it should reassure Bills fans that having the front office that we do, having Brandon Beane in place and in power here is going to pay dividends in this process. How organized and prepared they already were, and now any limitations that are there, I feel confident that it's going to impact us negatively less than other teams and other organizations. So it doesn't mean there won't be any negative impact, but I think that they're going to be able to survive it better. So appreciate all you guys jumping on. I think you did an awesome job tonight. It was a lot of fun. You've been listening to Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.